everybody! In today's video, I'm introducing the concept of pranayama, or breathing practice. My name is Zelinda, and I specialize in teaching yoga so that people with all kinds of bodies can participate and benefit. Let's get started. Normally, when we think of yoga practice, we think about the physical postures. Those are called asanas. The thing is that there are actually 8 limbs of yoga, and asana is just one of those 8 limbs. So let me tell you a little bit about that. The first limb of yoga is yamas, and the second is niyamas. And these two together are ethical principles for how we should live. After that, we have asana, which is the physical yoga practice. Then we have pranayama, breathing practice, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And then after that, we have the steps that start to lead into meditation. Today, we'll just focus on the pranayama. You might be wondering why you should be interested in pranayama. In other words, what are the benefits of breathing practice? Well, you probably have heard me talk about before how the goal of yoga or the purpose of yoga is to quiet the mind. The way we do that is through these different tools like the asana practice, the physical postures, and the pranayama practice, the breathing that we're working on today. So we can say that the pranayama practice is a more subtle practice, if you will. It's a more advanced practice than the asana practice. And it continues to help us learn how to refine our mind and calm the mind and help the mind be quiet and peaceful. The next thing you need to know is what exactly are you going to do in your breathing practice? So I'll teach you a few techniques that you can experiment with. But before I go into that, I want to let you know what your objectives of the breathing are. So the first thing is that we're working on lengthening out the breath. We want to lengthen the breath only as much as is comfortable for you. You probably remember the concept of ahimsa, kindness or non-harm, and that applies also in the breathing practice. So, we want to make sure that we're keeping the breathing comfortable. And then the second element that you need to know about is that we're practicing mindfulness. So we're not trying to breathe and let our mind wander off about, our grocery shopping trip later today. We want to keep our mind concentrated and focused on the qualities of the breathing. So you can notice, at the time when you're inhaling, you might even think in your mind, okay, now I'm inhaling. And when you exhale, you're observing that you're exhaling. There's lots of qualities to the breathing that you can pay attention to improve your mindfulness. And I'll talk to you more about that as we go. The first pranayama technique that I'd like to introduce is ratio. You might remember the word ratio from your math class. Ratio is R-A-T-I-O. And ratio means the proportion between your inhale and your exhale. And the way we figure that out is just by counting. We start by counting. And so if you want to right now, you can find a comfortable sitting position, and you're going to sit up toward the front of your chair if you're using a chair. Or of course, you can sit on the floor if you prefer. Regardless of how you're sitting, please make sure that you're lengthening your spine. The posture is really important when we're breathing, because the more we lengthen the spine, the more capacity the lungs and the ribs have to expand and contract. And you might imagine that you can expand and contract more when you're in a lengthened position than when you're in a slouched position. So that's why you want to have the tall posture. Okay, once you establish your posture and you're going to start to work on ratio, you're going to start counting the length of your inhale and also counting the length of your exhale. And you're basically going to just count about 1 count per second. So a slow count. You might do like inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Something like that. Your count may be different. It may be 2, it may be 6, it may be 8. It could be any number, but 4 is probably around, it's a common number, or maybe even an average number. So you're counting the length of your inhale and your exhale, and you want to do that over several rounds so that you can get kind of a better idea of what your actual number is. You might find that your inhale and exhale numbers are different, and that is okay. Let me talk to you a little bit more about that. So in breathing practice, generally, we want to have the exhale number be longer than the inhale number. If the numbers are equal, that's also fine, but we generally don't want the inhale number to be longer than the exhale number. And let me pause a minute to explain the why behind that. So the inhale and the exhale are linked to our nervous system. And if I just kind of put it in a nutshell, kind of a simplified version, is that the inhale is tied to the fight or flight response, or the stress response in the body. And the exhale is tied to the rest and relax, the relaxation response in the body. So that's why we don't want the inhale to be longer, because then we're actually adding stress into our system. Rather, we want them to be balanced, equal inhale and exhale, or let the exhale be longer. All right, so once you have done several rounds of counting your breath, you start to get a good idea of what your personal ratio is, kind of your starting ratio, or your relaxed starting ratio, if you will. And, make an adjustment if your inhale is too long so that the two numbers are equal. And then that can be your ratio. So say, like in the example that I gave, you counted that your inhale is 4 and your exhale is 4. You can use that as a breathing practice. You can sit and lengthen your spine, and you can inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can continue like that, breathing. You might set a timer and just do your breathing practice for a few minutes and see how you feel at the end of it. The second breathing technique that I'd like to share with you is pauses. And this second breathing technique can be used by itself, or you can combine it with the counting that we just talked about, the ratio, and you can use it either way. So when I'm talking about pauses, what I mean is at the end of the inhale, you just take a small pause, like a 1 second pause. And also at the end of the exhale, you take a 1 second pause. And so, if you're using your counting, then your sequence would be inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, pause. Exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, pause. And that can be your breathing practice. You can continue that sequence for a few minutes. If you don't like counting, that's perfectly fine. You can also use your pauses without counting, in which case you're just going to focus on the smoothness of your breath, and you're going to say, inhale, pause, exhale, pause, to whatever length of breath is comfortable for you. And the third breathing technique that I'll be teaching you today is Nyasam. So Nyasam is a Sanskrit word, and basically what it means in the breathing practice is that we're using the fingers to count the quantity of breaths. So we counted with ratio earlier. This is a different type of counting. This is counting how many breaths you have done. And I'm going to lift my hand up like this so that you can see better. But you're not going to actually keep your hands in the air like this when you're breathing. You're going to keep them resting down on your legs, on your lap. So what you'll do is on your inhale, the first one, you're going to keep the tip of your thumb joined to the tip of your index finger. That'll be for your inhale. And for your exhale. And then you can skip your thumb over to the tip of the second finger for your second breath. Inhale and exhale here. And then you continue to the third and the fourth fingers. And so you can keep count of the quantity of breaths in this way. You could also do both hands at the same time. Either way is perfectly fine. And so there's these kind of two different techniques that you can use for knowing how long to breathe. Either you can set a timer, or you can use Nyasam and count the quantity. And, obviously you'll be counting in multiples of 4 because you have 4 fingers. So you may decide that you're going to do your breathing practice, say this evening, and you may say, okay, today I'm going to do 8 breaths, and I'm going to use the ratio technique and the pause technique. And so, after, at the designated time when you're ready to do your breathing practice in the evening, you'll sit down, you'll lengthen your spine, and you can get your hands ready, putting your tips of your thumbs to the tips of your index fingers. And then you can begin, and you'll inhale and you'll count whatever your number is, pause, exhale to your count, pause. Skip over to the second finger, and you're going to continue like that through the 4 fingers, and then you're going to repeat one more round so that you complete a total of 8 breaths. All of this is meant as an introduction to help you get started with your pranayama practice. And as you probably know, yoga is one of those things that we really learn about, or we really start to benefit from, by actually doing. And the same thing applies to the pranayama practice. I can tell you about it, or you can read about it in a book or online or something, but you won't really start to understand the pranayama practice until you're doing it yourself. So I would suggest that you take 1 or 2 or maybe even all 3 of these techniques that we've talked about today and start to implement them at some point in your day when you have time to work on the pranayama. So either along with your asana practice, or maybe before bed, or at another time during the day that works best for you. You can start to work on these breathing techniques. And as you go, you'll have some observations about your breathing. You'll have some observations about your mind. And I'd love to hear about those, especially if you have any questions or if you come up on any difficulties. So if you have anything that you'd like to talk about with the breathing practice, please drop me a note in the comments section. And then after you've done this for a few weeks and you're ready for the next step, let me know and I'll start to work on the next video for you. Thank you for hanging out with me and learning about pranayama today. I look forward to seeing you next time.